Welcome everyone to today's program. I am Kathy Brett with Becker's Healthcare. The program will begin with a presentation and we will have a question and answer session following completion of the presentation. You can submit any questions you have throughout the presentation by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. Our presenters will attempt to answer as many questions as they can during the time we have, and will follow up on questions they do not have the opportunity to address. You will receive an email within about a week following the webinar that will include instructions on how you can download a copy of the presentation. You will also receive a follow-up email shortly after completion of the program, and you can submit your feedback or any additional questions at that time. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. Mike Williams serves as the President and Chief Executive Officer of CHC. A frequent national speaker on the impact of hospital conversions to for-profit status, Mike brings over 30 years of executive management, board relationship management, and an understanding and passion for the not-for-profit mission of the healthcare industry to the CHC team. Prior to being the founding executive of CHC, Mike served as president of the Baptist Hospital in Knoxville, Tennessee, EVP and COO of the Children's Medical Center, and vice president for Baylor University Medical Center, both in Dallas, Texas. Mike graduated from the University of Alabama and holds a master's degree in health administration from the Medical Center in Birmingham, where he was named Outstanding Alumnus in 2003. Glenn Robinson has been the Chief Executive Officer of Hillcrest Baptist Medical Center since 2007. He came to Hillcrest from Spartanburg, South Carolina, where he served as CEO of Mary Black Health System. Prior to that, he has held CEO positions in Nacogdoches Medical Center in Nacogdoches, Texas, Sharpstown General Hospital in Houston, Texas, and Eastmoreland Hospital in Portland, Oregon, as well as management positions at other hospitals in Texas and Alabama. He is a native of Georgia and a graduate of the University of Alabama with a Bachelor of Science in Communications in Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas, with a Master of Science in Healthcare Administration. He has more than 25 years experience in hospital and healthcare management. He is board certified in healthcare management and a fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives. He serves as an adjunct lecturer for both Baylor University and Trinity University. It is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to Mike Williams to begin today's presentation.
Kathy, thank you, and thanks to each of you who have taken the time out today to join us for what I hope will be a very informative presentation, and we do look forward to your questions. Let me speak just for a moment about Community Hospital Corporation. We are a unique organization in that we are a not-for-profit 509A support entity. In addition to owning a number of institutions, not-for-profit hospitals, we also lease and manage a number of institutions and have a large consulting business related to the survivability of hospitals like each of you serve. Next slide, please. And if you can go to the next slide. I do appreciate Glenn joining me today. Glenn and I have had a professional relationship for a number of years, and Glenn will take time after I speak to walk you through a case study, which I think you'll find very interesting. Slide number 3 represents just a total of number of community hospitals that exist in the country today. Let me point out to you that of the some 5,700 hospitals, you would find that 4,900 are really classified as community hospitals, but about 2,000 are rural community hospitals and about 1,300 critical access hospitals. I really don't like to use the word rural because many small community hospitals, and I think the more appropriate focus is on small community hospitals, and the critical access institutions are those that we at CHC typically focus upon. You probably have read in recent days that 2012 was the year in which there has been more merger and relationship activity than any in the last 2 decades. One of the things that we are asked many times is that why is there such activity going on around the country? Many of you know with the challenges coming forth from the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, the decreases in reimbursement, the opportunities to understand a community hospital's role in an accountable care organization, many CEOs, members of boards, and others are asking the question, what's the future for our community hospital, particularly if we're governmentally related or if we are not a part of a large system? What's our future, and what should we be doing to think about that proactively as we move forward? If you'll go to the next slide, please. There are a number of both opportunities or strengths for community hospitals. And the next slide. As well as challenges that those of you representing hospitals who are on the call face. But let's not spend our time today in that it's limited talking about those opportunities or challenges. Let's go to the next slide. And instead of talking about opportunities or challenges, let's talk about the conversations that are going on between hospitals like yours and potential relationships. Now, I don't want to use the word partner. I want to use relationships because many times that's where institutions, hospitals begin their thought process. We're not going to sell, we're not going to lease, but we don't necessarily want to continue, don't think we can be successful continuing into the future in an independent fashion. So let's begin talking about the conversations that many of you might have with other institutions relative to a relationship. First and foremost is to understand and to assess the community need that exists in your local community relative to the services that you are offering, those that you are not offering but could be offering, or those that perhaps are offered in other locations within your region. And looking at those, you also have to ask yourself the question, what breadth of clinical services do you have or might you need to have in the future? What additional breadth might come from the relationship you're looking to enter into? What is the relationship of your institution to physicians? And what are the strengths associated with those relationships? Or what strengths might come forth from the relationship that you might enter into with another organization? More often than not these days, we're all looking at our revenue and our expense levels, and consequently our margin, and asking ourselves the question, how can we sustain or improve our margins necessary to be competitive and to sustain our missions into the future? In looking for a relationship, we also ask the question, what is the managed care leverage that will come forth from a potential relationship that we're evaluating? And what is the compatibility of that organization's purpose, or let me use another word, mission, to that organization, to our own organization? And then finally, what is the reputation of an organization with whom we're considering a relationship? Is it so positive that we experience what I call a halo effect, bringing that larger organization's abilities and reputation to the smaller community is very important in choosing that partner. Next slide. One of the first questions that I often receive when beginning the process of board education or talking to managers about potential relationships is, why are you thinking about entering into these relationships? The most common answer I receive is, we need access to capital. Well, let's think about that. If in fact you're asking someone to invest in your community, in your institution, to put at risk their dollars, you would certainly appreciate the fact that in making that investment, they're going to want to make sure that there is appropriate control levels for the investment they've made, that you at the local level are making the right decisions strategically. So I think this slide does a great job in saying what you're looking for is to achieve the appropriate balance between access to the capital, or what we sometimes say credit worthiness that you might need, with preserving the level of control that your institution and particularly your board of directors might see as appropriate in your situation. Obviously, the more money you need invested, the more credit worthiness of a larger institution you need to rely upon, the least control you're going to wind up having once that relationship is initiated. Next slide. One of the things that we encourage the organizations that we work with to do as they begin the consideration of relationships or partnerships is to be very proactive. Don't wait for someone to come to you, particularly if you're financially challenged or have other operational issues, but be proactive in understanding who the potential partners or relationships are and understand that the board and their position relative to your future is critical to the success of the potential partnership or relationship. We have experienced or are seeing organizations where, in fact, a CEO or a management team led consideration of partnerships or relationships down to the 11th hour. And when, in fact, it came to the board had not been educated in such a fashion as to understand the rationale of what was causing or the need for such a relationship. And so it's very important from the outset to keep the board very much involved. And it's also important with the board's participation and medical staff's participation to define the optimal terms of that relationship that you're looking into. Make sure that when you're being proactive, to say this is what you want, this is what you need, not what is it that you have to offer. Next slide. Now, there are an array of relationships that you might be considering. Let's think about those that have what I call the most meaningfulness and those that perhaps are not, don't have meaningfulness, but certainly require less commitment or integration. If you look to the left of this slide, you see clinical affiliation. And I'm sure that many of you have already entered into a clinical affiliation with a larger entity. Most times that benefits the larger entity more so than it does the smaller entity, because you're looking for the quality of care and the excellence and reputation for referring patients that you might have in your smaller community to the urban marketplace for the care that they need. It's important to have those clinical affiliations, but what you might receive for them yourself or from them yourself is more of a bit of a halo effect versus having something that's concrete and that really is measurable in terms of the relationship. If you go all the way to the other end of the spectrum, it's the sale of your asset, where in fact you've made the decision, or your board has made the decision, that your only option for future success is to sell. And folks, that's one of the things I would suggest to you is sometimes we go all the way from the consideration of clinical affiliation to we are now in such financial challenge, in such a financially challenged position that we have to sell. What our experience has been is one that would suggest that there are many options between clinical affiliation and sale, which organizations do not proactively think about, which does provide the access to capital, creditworthiness, or clinical excellence that's necessary, while at least optimizing the level of control or the appropriate amount of control that the local board would desire. These might be some type of lease relationship, some type of joint venture, and we can respond to specific questions about those as we go forth with the presentation. Next slide, please. Regardless of what you are thinking about for your future, one of the most important things to do up front is what we say or call get your house in order. It makes common sense that if you're going to sell something, you want it to be in its best condition when in fact it goes on the market. Or if in fact you want to create some type of other relationship that's not a sales relationship, you want to make sure that the ship is shined and that everything is in top working order before you begin looking for a partner for a potential relationship. Well, how do you do that? And these are probably 3 or 4 of the most important points in this presentation. And it's one of the things that we have actually assisted hospitals in some 29 states in assessing what, first of all, their market position is. What is the level of out-migration from your community to other institutions? Why is it occurring? Is it because you don't have physicians to provide those services? Is it because there's a reputation, a clinical reputation that's more important? But to do a professional market assessment to understand who you are serving by payer class, by clinical disease, is very important to understand the type of partner you're going to be looking for and also where your strengths are. Secondly, and perhaps most importantly, is to do an operational assessment of the operations of your organization. To understand if, in fact, you are profitable, where does the profit come from? And if, in fact, you're not profitable, where are the opportunities for improvement? There are 4 key areas that we encourage all of our clients to look at internally. The first is revenue cycle. What is it that optimizes the billing for and collection of dollars necessary to keep your organization running? A complete and valid revenue cycle assessment. Secondly, what is supply chain? What are the opportunities around your supply chain? And when we speak of supply chain, it's not just looking for the right GPO, but what is the opportunity within your own operations to understand the processes that are important for a supply chain, to understand the amount of capital equipment you have sitting on your shelves that is not being appropriately turned over or deployed. The third is your information systems. What are the opportunities both for the exchange of clinical information with your physicians and perhaps with other relationships or partners? And what is the optimum position that your information technology should be in relative to meaningful use and other governmental requirements? And then lastly, productivity. I have to say, and it was disclosed by Kathy at the outset of this relationship, that our organization advocates for the public and not-for-profit institution. But we look to the standards that in many cases have been set by the investor-owned sector to measure optimal productivity. We believe that the business acumen, sense of accountability, and the measurement of outcomes that is mandated in the investor-owned community has to become a daily regimen within the public and not-for-profit community such that we can compete as we move forward with all types of providers. So understanding what the productivity standards for your organization need to be is most important. Now, you can look at some benchmarks that are provided publicly across the country, but as you know better than I, every hospital is different. And so we think it's important to go all the way down to the cost center and look at the opportunities for suggesting process improvements that would yield the optimum number of FTEs in your situation. And then thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, is making sure that your board is involved, as I said before, from the very outset of the relationship, educating them as to why there is a need for change. What's going on on the national healthcare scene that will impact your organization moving forward. Making sure as well that your leadership of the medical staff and based upon the size of your institution, your physicians are all understanding that this is where we are, being very transparent, and this is where we need to go. And we've got to assess how, in fact, we're going to financially, operationally, and clinically get there. Next slide, please. Once, in fact, the board and other stakeholders are educated, you have to set forth your strategy based upon your internal market assessment, based upon your financial need that results from your operational assessment, and based upon what you think the ideal balance of access to external dollars, credit, or services might be, with the desire of your board to maintain local control. You have to understand what it is you're asking for, as well as what it is you're willing to give up to achieve the partnership you're getting ready to enter into. Next slide. Many of your institutions and many institutions that we have worked with are candidates for acquisition by the investor-owned sector. Now make sure that you hear me loud and clearly, and that is that the investor-owned sector of hospitals is not a bad provider of services. They just serve a different master. In the public and not-for-profit communities, we serve the community. We serve those that have created and provided the funds for our creation and continuing operation. And in the investor-owned sector, those institutions serve principally to meet the expectations of the shareholders. So many of the investor-owned organizations, when in fact they're looking to expand, would look first at non-performing organizations, those that are financially challenged, those that by bringing the discipline and accountability that the investor-owned sector is literally used to deploying could result in a quick fiscal turnaround. They look for communities with stable demographics where in fact there is the population necessary to generate the request and requirement for healthcare services that can be profitable. They look for communities where in fact it's easy or more easy to recruit physicians. And they also look for those institutions who have limited capital available for improvements because an opportunity to suggest to the local institution that their physical appearance or capital structure is going to be improved in the short term can be very attractive. It would not be surprising to you to know that they would look for those communities, and many of you would qualify, where in fact there is a minimal managed care penetration, where there's a greater percent of those managed care plans that pay a percent of charges. Another very attractive feature is if in fact you're a sole community provider or a niche player where in fact there's an opportunity for success. Any of those characteristics that your organization might be experiencing where there is an opportunity for maximizing a charge structure and creating higher margins is very attractive, as well as the opportunity to find a board who has been so frustrated with the challenges of managing their institution that they are ready to cede control to another entity. Next slide, please. And when in fact you have been identified as an appropriate candidate, there are certainly those organizations who would target particular stakeholders to make recommendations relative to the purchase of your asset, whether it might be former board members, current board members, physicians, county commissioners, or other elected leaders to say that we have an answer for you that will bring more success to your healthcare delivery system in your community if you'll only listen to us. Now, folks, listen to this statement. If, in fact, those organizations have the business acumen to bring to you those things that will make you successful, why is it that you cannot access the resources to do it yourself? There's no question but that the least expensive form of capital, regardless of whether it's for operations or whether it's for capital needs in terms of building equipment, et cetera, is municipal revenue bonds, tax-exempt revenue bonds, et cetera. When in fact you sell your institution to a third party, not necessarily just an investor-owned third party, but perhaps even a larger system, certainly they're going to bring some resources to improve your operations, but any dollars that they put into your operations or into a foundation are going to have a return that will require a return that far exceeds the cost of accessing capital through the not-for-profit sector, through revenue bonds or other types of obligation bonds. That's the least expensive capital that you can access, but you have to be credit worthy. So I think all the things that I've talked about relative to understanding your market, understanding your operations, knowing where you are, asking yourself the questions, what do we need to do to be more credit worthy, and then having accomplished those goals, ask yourself, then what type of relationship might we be looking to enter into as we move forward? Next slide. I'm going to yield the floor to Glenn Robinson, but let me say that the relationship, the work that we did with Hillcrest Baptist was not only challenging, but extremely rewarding. Part of that relationship was the identification of the need for a new CEO, a creative leader who was exceptionally skilled in building relationships with a challenged medical staff. Glenn's predecessor had resigned from the role that he had occupied, and so finding the right person to lead this organization into the future, understanding that change was inevitable, was extremely important. So we entered into a management relationship with Glenn's board of directors, having completed an operational assessment and quantified what could be, went to the marketplace and found Glenn Robinson, who now some 4 to 5 years later has continued to lead Hillcrest Baptist into success. And so with that, let me yield the floor to Glenn.
Mike, thank you very much. Very gracious words. It's an honor to join you and CHC and the entire Becker team today for this webinar. The case study that we are going to jointly present today is truly about Hillcrest's success, but it's also about a successful partnership with an outstanding organization that we know is Scott & White Healthcare. And it's also a testimony to CHC's guidance and leadership toward this success. Next slide. We're located in Waco, Texas, which is in central Texas. We're along the I-35 corridor. Our county is approximately 250,000 people, and we're about an hour and a half south of Dallas-Fort Worth and about an hour and a half north of Austin, Texas. Temple, which is the home of Scott & White, our partner that we will talk more about in a few minutes, is 30 miles to the south on I-35 as well. This is a map of our marketplace, and until 1992, the two hospitals that serve this community were both located in the inner city part of our community. Providence Hospital is a faith-based Catholic facility that is a part of Ascension. Hillcrest Baptist Medical Center, obviously a faith-based Baptist hospital, was at that time a standalone facility with no additional resources for capital. The community was growing to the southwest, and in the early 90s, Providence Hospital, our competitor, wisely moved toward the growing part of our community. And this began a shift in the marketplace, initially gradually, and then it began to shift more and more over the next several years. As market share changed, also physicians began to office in new areas of town surrounding the high-growth marketplace in the southwest. Next slide. This is a photograph of our original facility. It was originally built in 1920, and as many health systems have across the country, we began to grow and expand. It's more than 600,000 square feet. It's well maintained, but it is older, and it also, as we noted earlier, was in a challenging part of the community. Next slide. This photograph is of our new facility. It's a 237-bed campus that we located right on I-35 and at the intersection of State Highway 6, a very busy intersection and crossroads for Texas. We opened this facility in April of 2009. We continue to operate the full 237 beds here, as well as we're still operating 73 beds at the Herring Avenue campus, made up of rehab beds and skilled nursing beds as well. So we currently are licensed for 310 beds at both facilities in this marketplace. Next slide. This is a very interesting slide. The top bar, which is in green, represents market share for Hillcrest Baptist Medical Center starting in the year of 1999. The bottom bar represents our competitor, Providence Hospital, and that is located there in the blue graph. And you can see that there was a significant shift in market share that began around the turn of the century. Then in 2004, there was a loss of a major physician group at Hillcrest, and then through the next remaining years, there were other challenges, such as a specific loss of physician confidence, such as Mike alluded to earlier. So business continued to shift in our marketplace. Next slide. As we concluded fiscal year 2007, which is identified there in the red, the bar on the left, you can see that that was not a very pretty year for Hillcrest Baptist Medical Center. We lost more than $6 million. Also, several other things were going on that year. The construction of our new facility had begun, and in addition, CHC had been brought in by our board and in March of 2007, and search for a new CEO began, and I was honored to be asked to come and serve this facility in September of 2007. Together, teamed up with the valuable CHC staff, we began to work on operational excellence and trying to turn our facility around through a number of cost reductions, and our team here worked extensively with physicians in our marketplace. We worked with our department leaders, looking for every cost that we could cut in every service line that we could grow, every physician relationship that we could build. And in 9 months, there was a $16 million turnaround, so that at the end of 9 months, we were a little north of $10 million in EBITDA going into fiscal year 2008. And all that sounds good, but unfortunately, we were also facing new financial challenges when we would move this next year, which would be in 2009, to the new hospital. And when the move occurred, the new debt responsibility would begin, and that's reflected on the next slide. 4 numbers are represented here, and I will go from left to right. The first represents the bond payments of a little more than $16 million in principal plus interest, and then an additional $3 million, which is to be repaid to HUD, who was the bond guarantor and who we secured the mortgage from. And so each year for 10 years, we had to pay an additional $3 million on top of the $16 million in principal and interest for what is called a mortgage reserve fund, the cost of financing through HUD, if you will. And HUD also, as represented in the second green bar, expects you to earn for cash flow about 1.5 times the principal and interest amount. And you may remember the P&I is a little north of $16 million. So what HUD was expecting us to achieve in the early days was $24.8 million per year in EBITDA. However, we still have operating expenses for 2 campuses, and in order to achieve a break even, we forecasted we must earn $27.4 million just for a break even proposition. And then as we look to the future to begin capitalizing and replacing capital equipment and having a sound capital expenditure program, we should be earning somewhere in the neighborhood of about $33 million. A far cry from where we were in 2008. And even though it had been a significant turnaround, we still had a much steeper hill to climb. Next slide. As I mentioned, we still had a lot of work to do in our marketplace, and in addition to that, the strained relationships that Mike alluded to, even though that in the first 120 days on the ground here, our team, we met one-on-one with more than 200 physicians, trying to restore trust, trying to improve communication. But as we know, in working with our medical staffs, that doesn't happen overnight. It takes a great deal of time. So we began to develop a physician leadership group to try to further improve trust, and we continue to focus on operational excellence with CHC's guidance and the proven matrix they have for improvement. Next slide. I mentioned the physician leadership group, and that's a very simple group, but it's a very important group. It includes 15 members of the physician, the component that's selected by the CEO from the medical staff. It's physician-led. One of the physicians is appointed to be the leader. It meets monthly. The other attendees who attend this monthly evening meeting, not only of the CEO, but the Chief Operating Officer, the Chief Medical Officer, and the Chief Nursing Officer. In other words, members of our team that can respond to our physicians and be able to correct things and improve the processes of our organization. In addition, our board chair attends the physician leadership group as well, and this ties together the medical staff, the governing board, and administration. The main focus of the physician leadership group are simply 2 things: clinical processes, and process improvement. So focusing on quality, focusing on processes. And each month we take away assignments, and then the next month we respond back as an administrative team to our physician leaders of saying, you asked for this improvement, this is the progress we're making, or this is the remedy that's been applied, so that we're held accountable in a written document format each month. And this began together a slow process of restoring the medical staff's trust in leadership and in the governing board. And we didn't stop there. At our routine large medical staff meetings that we would have throughout the year, we would report to the medical staff what the physician leadership group was accomplishing. Again, the PLG, the physician leadership group, does not replace your medical executive committee. The medical executive committee still is important for bylaws and credentialing and those kinds of things. The PLG just focusing on clinical issues and process issues as well. Next slide. So as we take a look at the operational improvement, it was important to reduce staffing, and we were on a run rate north of 5.0, typically running about 5.2 EEOB, and we were able to reduce that in a year's time down to about 4.4. Today we run on average about 4.2 EEOB. And it was also important to make sure that we move that EBITDA number in an upward direction. And so each month we moved EBITDA from the red to the black ink. But we continue to ask ourselves the question, would this really be enough, though, to protect our future as a freestanding hospital? And CHC helped us in so many ways as we looked ahead and we looked into the assessment of our strengths and weaknesses. Next slide. We saw a strong immediate operational improvement that we've talked about. We had the hospital under construction. Those are very positive things as we looked into the future. We had a strong primary care network that we had an alignment through an employment model of 38 physicians, including family medicine physicians and pediatricians, and that was a real big positive for us. The majority of our medical staff, very high quality throughout this medical community, a positive. But also a majority of our medical staff were really committed to remaining independent members of the medical staff. And so that creates a lot of challenges as you try to create further alignment. And this left a great deal of long-term uncertainty for us, especially facing our industry's decline in reimbursement, the growing underinsured and uninsured in our marketplace. For instance, Hillcrest, we're a trauma center, we're a safety net hospital. We provide each week $1.5 million in uncompensated care at that time. That number's now grown to an even larger number. But at that time, we were facing that amount in uncompensated care being delivered each week. So what was the ability for us to be able to sustain long term? And by doing so alone, was it possible? So if we chose to move forward in a partnership, which became the next logical conclusion, what would the criteria be in a worthy partner, in a partner that could really come along beside of us and support us and help us? Next slide. CHC guided us as an administrative team to convene the board, and Mike Williams was personally present, and he helped us as we met together as administrative leaders and as board members to say, what are the must-haves? In other words, if we go into a partnership, what are some things that we must be able to hold on to? And so we identified that for the independent medical staff members to continue to feel comfortable with us and support us, we must have continued choice, and that must remain in our marketplace. We wanted to protect our name and our brand as well. We had an 80-year rich history. We were also looking for a fair and balanced board because we knew we would be the weaker partner. And so the dominant partner, would they totally control the board, or would we have a fair and balanced board? Also, it was important for our family medicine physicians and our pediatricians that were aligned through an employment model for them to continue to maintain their separate identity. And then there was a commitment to continue the expansion that had begun through the construction project. And of course, being a faith-based hospital, that was very important to board members and administrative team members alike of protecting our faith-based heritage. So who would be that ideal partner? Next slide. We were looking for a partner that would have similar culture, It must be a physician-oriented partner because that's really the future, and that's a personal belief of mine and the administrative team and also CHC that we must be a very physician-friendly organization. The ideal partner would be financially strong, and boy, would it sure be nice if they also had an existing presence in the marketplace. In other words, would there be any volume that could be moved in our direction through such a partnership? Next slide. So after looking at several other systems, Scott & White became an obvious choice for us to consider. They're a nonprofit integrated healthcare system only 30 miles away. They already had 3 major clinics in our marketplace. They employ more than 1,000 physicians and scientists throughout our Central Texas area. They're a primary teaching affiliate of the Texas A&M College of Medicine. They were financially strong, and it was also interesting as we looked at Scott & White's values and we looked at Hillcrest's values, they lined up almost one for one as we looked at excellence and service and high quality and patient-centered. And the only differences that we had is Scott & White was an academic medical center, so research was one of their values, and with us being a faith-based hospital, of course, that was one of ours. But all the other values just lined up perfectly. And as you can see, a sizable organization of over 14,000 employees, over 1,000 licensed beds, serving more than 1.5 million patients in the marketplace, and they have a health plan, the Scott & White health plan, with almost $250,000, more than 250,000 members in that health plan. Also, it would be important to note that in McLennan County, the county in which we reside, Scott & White health plan, when you look at all the commercially covered lives in the marketplace, Scott & White health plan at that time was experiencing almost a 30% market share. Next slide. As we met with the Scott & White leaders, a very simple and very fair governance structure emerged early. The governance structure that we talked about is the governance structure that we wound up with and enjoy today. It's a 12-member board, Hillcrest Health System, the minority partner in this 80-20 partnership. Scott & White may have 80% equity, Hillcrest 20% equity, but on the governance side, which is where the decisions really get made, 50-50. And HHS has 6 directors, and Scott & White actually appointed 5 directors and used its 6th position for the CEO, bringing even further balance to the equation. A very honorable move by Scott & White. Next slide. Due to the weaker financial position, other negotiation points also gained increased value. We talked about the board composition, but also this is an element that CHC helped us with by being a minority partner, looking for important reserve powers to protect those must-haves that we talked about earlier. And so certain actions would require the approval of both the HHS board and the Scott & White board, such as any amendment going forward of the Articles of Incorporation or the bylaws, or a change in tax-exempt status, or our mission or our purpose, or the admission of any new corporate member. Next slide. From an operations standpoint, employees, Hillcrest would continue to be Hillcrest employees in the near term, all except the CEO, who would continue to be employed by CHC. And I would say after 3 years of the partnership, in January 2012, I was actually transitioned from the CHC payroll to the Scott & White payroll. And so I'm now officially a part of the Scott & White system, and we continue to enjoy a great relationship with CHC as well. But for clinical matters, the board would delegate authority to the physician leadership group, and as we noted earlier, that was comprised of physicians and representatives of the Hillcrest Health System and also Scott & White. Next slide. So in evaluating this partnership, what would be some potential downsides? Well, we would be losing our full independence for sure. There would be the risk of our relationship that we were working so hard to restore with our medical staff, and there would be especially a risk in our relationship with our very valued and trusted primary care group. And of course, there would be certain community stakeholders where the risk in that relationship would occur. Next slide. But then as we began to evaluate the potential upsides, they far outweighed the downsides, such as strengthening our financial position, creating a stable beginning at a very beautiful and new and vibrant and strategic location in the marketplace, access to the Scott & White health plan, the perceived halo effect by many that Scott & White in Texas is known for high quality. Scott & White is known nationally for continuing to provide extremely high quality at some of the lowest cost in the nation. And being a part of that system, a huge benefit. And further expansion of valuable training programs, and then synergies through key service lines such as trauma and post-acute care, oncology. So our board moved forward. Next slide. A memorandum of understanding was approved by both HHS and Scott & White, and to protect those relationships that we were concerned about, we actually went ahead and did something very unusual. We announced the partnership, the proposed merger, 1 full year prior to actually executing the agreement. And that gave us plenty of time to speak in community forums, speak in employee forums, to get more and more of the stakeholders more comfortable with this proposed merger. We conducted due diligence during that time, of course, and the definitive agreement became effective on April the 1st in 2009. So what's happened in the following 3 years? Next slide. I'm pleased to tell you I'm blessed with an incredible administrative team, and this team has sustained operational and financial improvement each year. In fact, fiscal year 12 was the strongest financial year in Hillcrest history in more than 16 years. We've been able to strengthen physician relationships. Are they perfect? We still have opportunities, but we have come so far in the trust factor and with our members of our medical staff. We've strengthened our community relationship and our community presence. We've sustained a positive market share trend that's now moving forward and moving more positive instead of negative. And in addition, the Scott & White Center for Rehabilitative Medicine is now at Herring Avenue, our original location. We're now the main provider for all rehab care in all 12 hospitals for the Scott & White healthcare system. That's been a plus for Hillcrest. It's been a plus for Scott & White. It's also been a huge plus for the Waco area. And now, opening in October of this year, a new Scott & White Regional Cancer Center that will be built here on our campus, and a new Hillcrest Surgery Center that opens here in just 2 months. And as we've seen, additional surgical specialty growth as well. Next slide. This slide speaks so well of how far that we've been able to see the progress in a 6-year run rate of operating EBITDA. From the loss of $6.5 million back in fiscal year 7, we saw the change in 08, and then 09 was the year that during the midst of that year we moved to the new campus. And once we were fully operational here on the new campus, you can see what has happened. That's also fiscal year 10, the first year of the partnership that CHC helped guide us towards Scott & White. And fiscal year 10 was the first year that was fully implemented. And you can see the continued growth in operating EBITDA. Next slide. So what's ahead for our future? We believe that we're now part of a model that is well positioned for the future of healthcare in America, not only locally, statewide, but even a national presence with a well-respected organization like Scott & White. And on top of that, we're very excited about the announcement that was made just in December going into the Christmas holidays with the pending merger of Baylor Healthcare System of the Dallas-Fort Worth area and Scott & White Healthcare. We also locally believe that it's important for us to continue our commitment to our community and the delivery of high-quality, affordable health care to our region. And we're able to do this through the adoption of best clinical practices that Scott & White offers us and benefiting our synergistic relationships that are creating value for our patients, for our physicians, and for our community. Mike, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, Glenn, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, this is an excellent example of an organization that was poised for a sale or for actually closure, whose board members sought expertise from the outside to say what alternatives might we consider as we make a commitment to move forward and to sustain the mission and legacy of the Hillcrest Health System. And as Glenn has so aptly suggested, this is an organization now that is tremendously positioned for success, already having their own internal success, and we at CHC have been proud to be a part of their movement over these past number of years. I'll just encourage you before we go to questions to ask yourself the question, what is it that your organization is positioned to do? What questions might you have that you would need external resources to answer, and how can you optimally position your organization for the future? Now, Kathy, for questions. Next slide.
Okay, thank you, Mike and Glenn, for your very informative presentation. We will now begin the Q&A portion of the program, and as a reminder, you can submit any questions you have by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. And our presenters will attempt to answer as many questions as we have during the remaining time we have allowed. We do have a couple of questions, and if you don't mind, I'll just jump right into the first one. And this question is for Mike Williams. Can a community hospital carve out services for a partnership relationship with an investor while still remaining primarily nonprofit?
Kathy, thank you. And the answer to that is absolutely, particularly if that community hospital is a not-for-profit. There is an opportunity for a community hospital to have a wholly owned for-profit subsidiary. And it's that for-profit subsidiary that can enter into joint ventures with other entities that are proprietary in nature or with physicians in a proprietary fashion. Now let me add that some of the publicly governed institutions might have some challenges in creating a for-profit subsidiary, and for that reason some of those entities consider the not-for-profit status conversion or look to the creation of a for-profit business entity within the statutes, not of the hospital, but within the statutes of some related entity to achieve those purposes. But absolutely, I would encourage you all, just because you're not-for-profit or governmentally controlled, to not exclude from consideration potential joint ventures or for-profit subsidiary opportunities.
Thank you, Mike. This next question is for Glenn. Was Scott & White considered a competitor before you merged with them? How did you address that within your organization?
Well, that really speaks to the heart of one of the greater challenges, and yes, they were not only perceived as a competitor, they were a competitor. Not only were there, on any given year, probably 10 to 13% of patients leaving our county going to Scott & White's main campus in Temple, and at the time that was conceived certainly competitive. But also, Scott & White had successfully, since 1985, placed into our marketplace more than 40 physicians that were supporting the other facility in town, and especially the Scott & White primary facility in Temple. So indeed, it was not only perceived, it was real. So to me, the best thing to do is always be truthful and just acknowledge that yesterday they were a competitor, today they're a partner. And so it took a lot of work to try to present this in the right way. And in all candor, I would say a third of our medical staff initially were very much opposed to this, because they, in their private practices, saw Scott & White as a competitor. About a third of our physicians thought this was a great idea, and I would say that those were probably the younger physicians, because they see the future of healthcare. Those that were opposed, I would say there was a direct correlation between their opposition and the amount of gray hair in their temples, because they remembered when Scott & White came to town uninvited in 1985. And then there was probably another third of our medical staff that kind of sat back with their arms crossed and thought, well, maybe this could be a good idea. We'll just kind of wait and see. And I would say that that has changed. Certainly there are still some physicians in our marketplace that are uncomfortable with our partnership, and there's no denying that. But I would say that we've made huge improvements, and many physicians in this marketplace have kind of moved from being opposed to it to now they're actually not only practicing at this hospital. Many physicians that were not even on our medical staff in 2007 are now associated with this hospital through an employment model, because they believe this type of partnership with Scott & White and Hillcrest is a model for the future.
Thank you very much. This next question is for you as well, Glenn. It's a three-part question, so please feel free to ask me to repeat any part of it. Are there any concerns about marketplace monopoly and interference from the FTC such as concerns about price fixing and collusion activities prohibited by the Sherman Antitrust Act? And did you have to go through regulatory approvals, and if so, how long did that take?
Great questions, because they're extremely relevant. In our marketplace, we did not believe there should be any FTC concerns, and the reason being is because we had a very worthy competitor in the marketplace, a great healthcare system, and we both, at that point in time, shared about equal market share. So Scott and White, Hillcrest moving to Scott and White, we still able to offer this community choices, and so we did not receive any sort of delays through the Federal Trade Commission, et cetera. But however, we must receive their approval. And also in our state, and like many other states, the Attorney General also must approve such a transaction. The regulatory approval usually takes 4 to 6 months, I would just say on average and based upon our experience, and it took that long to make sure that we had provided them adequate data and the regulatory agencies were comfortable with our transaction.
Great, thank you. We have time for just another question or two. This next question is for Mike. Have you seen any special member arrangements where a larger nonprofit takes a minority interest in a smaller nonprofit?
Kathy, absolutely, and I appreciate that question. There is a foundation model 509A support member structure that allows a larger organization to become a Class B member of a smaller organization, and most importantly, for that larger organization to have defined roles, responsibilities, and powers, and to limit the liability of the operation of the smaller entity in such a fashion that it doesn't burden their balance sheet or credit worthiness. We'd be more than happy to discuss this particular approach, which is unique in the country, with both the questioner or others who might want to explore the benefits of having a non-controlling but relationship with a larger entity that brings them many of the things that we have talked about that's necessary for their continued success.
Okay, thank you. We have time for just one more question, and this question is for Glenn. What has the impact on your culture been?
I would say probably the main element of our culture that was that our employees, our associates, our medical staff, our board, our administrative leaders, our department leaders really wanted to protect was our faith-based heritage. And Scott and White already had a proven track record of partnering with an Adventist hospital in Killeen, Texas, Metroplex Hospital, and I would say that this has worked out very well. Scott and White, as our CEO, Dr. Bob Pryor, said, why would you not want to be a Baptist hospital in Waco, Texas, which is the home of Baylor University, the largest Baptist university in the world? Why would you not want to be Baptist? And so we've really enjoyed that. Scott and White respects that, and we've been able to really protect our faith-based culture. Our chaplaincy program is still alive and vibrant, and we even have a program here where after proper training, some of our associates volunteer that they're able to encourage patients, pray with them, those types of things. And so that all works out very, very well in our culture. And I would say that the best of our culture has been protected, and now we're enjoying the best of the Scott and White culture, which is a real focus on high quality and low cost and an integrated healthcare system. So we're benefiting from the best of both worlds.
And Kathy, the only thing I would add in the last moment about that is that is one of those issues that must be addressed early in the process. What are the cultural integration challenges that exist, and how will those be overcome, and then the business opportunities be addressed? Without an agreement for cultural integration and addressing all those things up front, the opportunity for future success is very minimal.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank Mike Williams and Glenn Robinson for their excellent presentation today. And a reminder to those of you who asked questions that we were not able to address will be sent to the presenters for their individual follow-up. Thank you all for attending this webinar today, and we look forward to having you join our future webinars. This will conclude today's program, and have a wonderful afternoon.